Okay, so whenever I have people that come to me with autoimmune issues, digestive issues, inflammatory issues, grains, guys, it's the first one to go. Then dairy, then soy, corn, and sugar. All right, so anyone has digestive issues, cut those things out now.
Well,
right?
usually you recommend cutting out coffee as well.
Yeah.
It isn't necessarily the same type of situation, but it for a lot of people it can cause a lot of digestive problems. So
now I want to talk about a broken digestive system versus a broken leg. This is what I tell my clients all the time. When you break your leg, you go to a doctor, they put it in a cast, and then you are on crutches. You don't put weight on that foot. You don't use it for months, right? What happens when your gut's broken? Do you go to a doctor and they say, well, don't use your gut for a few months? You can't do that. You'll die.
well, you
okay?
can. It's called an ileostomy or a colostomy.
Oh, yeah, where they literally, yeah, you don't want that. You do not.
I've been there. Don't do that.
But like your gut is broken, right? Let's say you're experiencing bloat, gassiness, immune responses, you know, like indigestion, heartburn. These are all red flags for indigestion. So your GI tract broke somewhere, right? Or you're eating foods that's breaking it down. We can't say, you know what? Don't use your gut for 3 months while it heals.
Right.
So that's why we say cut out those 5 foods that create the most inflammatory response. So comparing the gut to the legs again, right? Like if you have a broken leg, let's say you had to use that leg, we'd say, okay, limp on it while it's trying to heal. So when we're making food recommendations with your gut, we're saying eat foods that cause your gut to limp, right? That puts the least amount of strain on your gut as your gut heals. Is this making sense, you guys, so far? Okay, so you can't give your gut a break for a few months as it heals itself. You still have to use it. So now you have to use it in a very, very gentle way. Cut out those foods for a few months, and then you can slowly reintroduce them again while utilizing like digestive aids at the same time. Because again, another thing that we don't talk about with GI distress and inflammation is you add a chemical negative response to it, like let's say glyphosate from grains, all right? And it's creating that sandpaper effect. And then you add an emotional negative stressor to your life as well, which we're all experiencing all the time, especially right now. I wonder how many people are going to come out of this Corona-geddon and actually have like food.
Oh.
Are you live?
We are live, hopefully.
Which one is that?
This is YouTube and the Facebook group, which, you know, hopefully.
Here, by the way.
Hi.
We'll just wait for a few people to come on. I know I never give like specific times, but that's because our lives are kind of crazy.
We don't even know ourselves.
No, we don't.
It's just a mystery. What's your finger there?
Oh, why?
Because you're blocking up.
Oh, okay. So we have like 2 cameras here going at the same time. We're going to talk about digestion today, guys. So if you have questions about digestion, shoot them here. They can't be personal digestion questions like, I have this, what should I do? We can't do that.
Hypotheticals,
yeah,
right?
let's do like hypotheticals here.
Hypothetically speaking, if a person that is not me had this thing going on.
Yes. What should you do?
Or what would be some ideas?
Right.
Now, but we do need to cover some really basic stuff that might answer a lot of questions. So that
and that's what we're going to do. But throw out your questions anyway. We'll scroll up and we will we'll try and help or whatever. Let's bring this camera up.
Here.
Yeah, so that they're not looking up our noses. There we go. And I'm wondering how I can do this so that I can leave the camera floating without touching it, because I like to use hand gestures a lot to explain things. All right, guys, let's get into digestion. Why do so many Americans have digestive issues? I have a lot of reasons why. We did a podcast episode on this, you guys, and it's called, what's it called, Tristin? Do you remember?
No, just go to mygutsyhealth.com/blog and search digestion. You'll see it.
Yeah. How are you staying so positive? Oh my gosh. We can talk about that at the end. You guys, like, this isn't a scary time of life. I've been doing so much processing, and like, I can't say it's not a scary time of life, because there's transitions and it's hard. We can talk about this at the end if we have time, but like,
I can tell you for myself, I already went through my high anxiety freak out earlier this year. And so by the time this whole thing hit, I had already kind of come out the other side.
yeah,
And I'm kind of done with the fear stuff.
mm-hmm.
And that's because I've just been putting so much work into keeping my head in a good space.
Yeah.
And it's not something that just happens by default. I used to be that kind of, everything was happy and positive, and I only saw the, you know, the optimism side of life. And then cancer came and all of that fun stuff that goes with it. And that, I suddenly lost that privilege of just having the default of happiness. And ever since then, it's something that takes work for me. And I put a lot of work into it. And it takes discipline in the sense of, I have to really pay attention to the types of thoughts I'm having and catch the ones that are not helpful to me before they spiral into a full-on panic attack.
Right.
Because I've been there a lot, way more than I ever wanted to. So
let's talk about digestion, and then we can do all the chit-chat stuff at the end.
When you're anxious all the time, it messes with your digestion. So bam, here we are.
Okay, so I'm just trying to read these questions. Or it could be nagging pain, bruise from the inside, type of pain. Okay,
let's do our thing, and then we'll answer questions.
Yeah, we will.
So maybe hold off on your questions, because by the time we get to them, they'll have disappeared off the top of the screen. So
we're okay. If you want to listen into depth about how we got here as a society on really bad digestion, go back and listen to our podcast episode where we talk about like how there are foods that we eat on the daily that are literal poison to us. That, you know, there is that debate of glyphosate is not dangerous. You guys, how do we sit here in this first world country with all of our health issues and say we're totally fine? So we are literally spraying our crops with poisonous substances called glyphosate. We're eating inflammatory foods. Imagine this, and this is why so many kids are having digestive issues too. Certain foods are like sandpaper on the inside of your intestines, right? Now that over and over every single day is going to cause pain and inflammation and indigestion, bloat and gassiness. And that inflammation over and over and over is going to lead to allergy type symptoms and then eventually allergies to certain foods, right? So when people, and I saw someone like, why would my kid be having stomach pains? It's because they're eating something they're probably becoming allergic to now. An allergy, you don't just like wake up with overnight. Some kids are probably born with it. Who knows what happened in utero? I don't know. But like certain allergies, you know, you have full-blown anaphylactic shock, right? But then most allergies, I would say like 90% of allergies happen over like the period of years where you expose yourself to a certain food that creates that kind of sandpaper effect on your gut over and over and over again. And the immune system says, you know what? Every time this substance enters the body, it's creating pain. So now we're going to tag it and we're going to attack it. And now you have an autoimmune reaction to that food, right?
That's one way. There's also, though, that if you get a bad balance of bacteria and too many pathogenic species down in your lower intestine or your small intestine, then over time that basically wears down the intestinal lining, creates what's known as leaky gut, where little bits of food are able to escape out of the intestine into the bloodstream, and then the immune system picks up on those because proteins shouldn't be in the bloodstream, right? Proteins are dangerous because they contain DNA. And if you've got free DNA roaming around the body, it could get encoded into things, and then who knows what your body creates from that, right?
The kids really fast.
So your body tags those foreign proteins there.
Sorry, we have like 2 cameras.
This is why your phone is not a good camera. Right. Okay. And because that happens, they say we need to make sure that this foreign invader never comes back again. They create antibodies against it, and then before you know it, that food is no longer good for you. But you've got the straightforward allergy tests that will say, hey, if you eat this, you die, right? That's the tree nuts usually, but there's the most common ones. Eggs tend to fall in that category, soy, dairy, all those things. But you also have the lower grade inflammatory foods that are kind of specific to individuals. And they do have tests for this. If you wanted to go that far into it, they're called food inflammation tests. And they will look for an immunoglobulin response, meaning your immune system is reacting to this more than we would expect it to. And those are things that, at least at this point in time, they're not going to do well in your body. Right. But if we don't know about those things and we continue to eat them over and over again, imagine what that's doing to your body.
Let's talk about testing though too, because I've had so many people who have in our clinic, in our practice, they have their lice that they have, unless you've been listening to us. It's always like those honey bunches of oats things, right? That's
it's
wheat.
Like rice.
No, it's wheat. It's made of wheat. So that's wheat and glyphosate right there. So we're starting that inflammatory process from first foods. That's where it starts. So when you get 5-year-olds that have gut issues, it's no wonder they're having gut issues. We're now seeing 13-year-olds having gallbladders taken out, right? Like we're seeing, and again, it goes back to these inflammatory foods that aren't showing up as like a full-blown anaphylactic reaction in the body. It's showing up as indigestion. Now I'm kind of all over the place because I know I'm going to forget these things. When we think digestive issues, we don't think headaches, we don't think joint aches, we don't think brain fog, we don't think fatigue. These are all digestive inflammatory responses, right? So how many of you have brain fog? How many of you get headaches? How many of you get really tired after you're eating? I mean, what else would you say is like a negative gut reaction that people aren't putting 2 and 2 together?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of the energy related stuff, a lot of the cognitive issues. A lot of times it'll be the mood where you just get cranky and it's not really that you're tired, other than you probably have an insulin hangover. But right. Yeah, those are the big ones.
If you have a thyroid disorder, it's most likely from years worth of being overly exposed to inflammatory glyphosate and glutens.
Yeah.
So that creates a negative response in the gut, and that autoimmune reaction is also attacking the thyroid as well.
Yeah.
So you have Hashimoto's.
Another big one is the skin stuff that people will get, the eczema. Or the the rashes show up.
That's like our next podcast episode is skin disorders.
Oh, has that not even gone live yet?
No, we had to edit that one part.
Sneak preview.
I know.
Coming up on Tuesday, right?
Hopefully, that's if we have time to edit one part.
Probably do that.
I know, we need to do that tonight.
Anyway.
We're going to do that right now. Bye, guys. I'm just kidding. So skin disorders, how many people have acne? I mean, acne can be from gut inflammation and hormone dysregulation. So I've had 3 cases this week where people have said, I've come off my birth control, I'm breaking out like crazy, and I want to go back on it. And it's like, no, you are dumping tons of estrogen thanks to your birth control. Like, you just have to go through it, right? So hormones and gut inflammation causes eczema, acne, cystic acne, that kind of stuff. So many dysfunctions because of your gut, because the food you have been feeding yourself is like micro poisoning you, but you're not putting 2 and 2 together. Because we often think poison means I drink poison, I die the next day. No, you can microdose some poison for years and then get inflammatory responses, right? So again, it's going back to the gluten, the glyphosate, the sugars.
The biggest way that the poison really affects people that they don't even realize is their liver starts to take on the burden of that. And it's not to the point, again, where you're having noticeable, obvious symptoms. But when we do the blood work on it, we see a lot of stuff pointing back to, hey, your liver is really struggling here. We need to support that liver so that you can, get back on track again. And it's so closely related to your digestion.
Other ways your liver is tanking because your gut is tanking is your sex hormones. So
sex hormones are related to that, yeah.
So support your liver, support your detox pathways, support hormones, basically. Okay, let's go back to food though. So enteric nervous system is shut down because of stress. There's an inflammatory response in your gut because you've been eating inflammatory food your entire life. That is called the standard American diet, right? Soda, you guys, why are we still drinking that? Like why? Okay, we're going to talk about soda and hydrochloric acid in a little bit, but why? It's got like half my face in here.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. I talk about stomach acid so much.
There are at least three really important things that have to happen in the stomach. And the most important of the three is the acid.
The acid.
That's the whole point of the stomach. It's a big acid vat.
It is. So many cool things about hydrochloric acid, you guys. If you have a robust release of hydrochloric acid every time you eat, you are going to digest beautifully, okay? Most of us do not have a robust release of hydrochloric acid. If you want to find out if you have a good amount of hydrochloric acid being produced, do the baking soda test. So I always talk about this. My next Instagram post is going to be about this. First thing in the morning, what you want to do, half a cup of water, quarter teaspoon, please, not a quarter cup. I had someone do that and they were throwing up.
Yeah, don't do that.
So please don't do that.
You could get away with a half a teaspoon if you wanted to really push it, but a fourth should be more than enough.
Great, because you want to stay consistent. Every time you test, you want to make sure you're getting the same results, right? So half a cup of water, quarter teaspoon baking soda. First thing in the morning, you mix that, you chug it down, all right? And then you time yourself. If you burp within 2 to 3 minutes, awesome, like a nice big burp, all right? If you have not burped after 5 minutes, stop timing, you failed, or you didn't pass.
Can I tell them why?
Yes.
So what's supposed to happen is that the hydrochloric acid in your stomach should mix with the bicarbonate, which is in the baking soda, and it creates a chemical reaction. And that chemical reaction is 3 byproducts: water, salt, and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a gas, which means that as it builds up, it needs to release, and it's going to release via a burp. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have no hydrochloric acid in the stomach, that baking soda gets down in there and there's no chemical reaction. So that means there's no production of gas, which means there's no burping. So it's science, and it's really cool. And it's a very good gauge in most cases of the levels of hydrochloric acid that are in there. Occasionally there are people that for some reason, like they don't know how to burp or something, but for the most part it works really, really well as a gauge, and it's so easy to do. You can literally wake up tomorrow morning and do it, and you'll know. You did it today.
I did.
How'd it go?
10 minutes. I know. I thought I'd been healing because I used to take like 4 Zypan every meal, and now I take only 1 for my big meals, and I'm like, I'm doing so much better, and I'm not. So I'm still healing.
There are cases, though, where we resolve the stomach acid issue, and while we do see great improvement, we still aren't there. People are still struggling.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of possibilities that are going on with that. One of the big ones, well, we'll say 2 of the big ones, are the other 2 things that are supposed to happen in the stomach. One of them is the pancreatic enzymes.
Yes. Can I talk about this?
Please, yeah.
Because I love it. All right, so when you don't have a robust release of that hydrochloric acid because of stress and because of inflammation, that hydrochloric acid actually, like, it triggers, it's like a domino effect. It's the first domino to be pushed, and then like 100 other gastric things happen as well. So when you have a lot of hydrochloric acid being hit with food, it triggers a hormone called secretin, I think. And that hormone triggers, you guys know the gallbladder, right? It stores all, and then when food comes, that gallbladder like contracts and it pushes out all that bile, and it hits your food and it starts to emulsify fat. So a robust release of hydrochloric acid is going to trigger that secretin hormone, which triggers that gallbladder to contract, which is so cool. Now, how many of you have had your gallbladder cut out? Raise of hands. I haven't actually, so I'm not going to raise my hand. You most likely had low hydrochloric acid, so low stomach acid content for years leading up to that. What else can lead to that? Hey, baby girl, not right now. Let's not shake that right now. If you have been on PPI, so proton pump inhibitors, you probably had a gallbladder taken out after like several years, right? Let's talk about another thing. Let's talk about another thing that decreases hydrochloric acid content. Soda. All right. Soda is going to decrease your hydrochloric acid content. How many of you are chronic soda drinkers and don't have a gallbladder anymore? So again, not to make anyone feel shame, because when you know better, you do better, right? Your doctor never told you this, and they never will because they don't even understand this concept. So yay. But they know medication. Don't ask me about medication. I don't know anything about medication. Talk to your doctors about that. But when it comes to functional body stuff, please talk to us. Don't talk to your doctor about that because that's not what they were trained in. So do you see how important it is to have proper hydrochloric acid content? Anything else?
Okay, so we talked about hydrochloric acid. We talked about the bile. The third one, which
is the pancreas,
is the actual pancreatic enzymes, and their job is to kind of further break down the macros in your food so that you can access the nutrients in those.
So what happens, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. So when you eat your food, it hits your stomach acid, it turns into this chyme, right? You have a lot of hydrochloric acid, lots of food mixing. It's like emulsifying together.
A nutrient sludge.
Sludge, yes. And this very acidic nutrient sludge goes down into the small intestine. It triggers that secretin, which causes that gallbladder to contract. So now you have this nutrient sludge mixing with bile, and that acidity then triggers the pancreas to release its enzymes. So a bunch of bicarbonate soda is being released by the pancreas to neutralize that acidity as it enters the small intestine. It's also triggering that chyme, that hydrochloric acid chymeness is also triggering the border of your small intestine to release enzymes as well. So do you see how hydrochloric acid is so fundamental in triggering all of these responses? Now, that is why when you guys don't have enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, it just sits there because there is nothing being triggered. Like, it's just sitting there and we're just waiting and waiting and waiting. It's a chemistry, like it's a chemistry class. We're waiting for chemistry to happen, but part of the chemical reactors are not there.
And what happens when food sits in a damp, warm environment, dark as well, over a long period of time? It ferments, right? It putrefies.
And
it rots.
And there's certain bacteria that loves rotting food. Bad bacteria.
There's bad bacteria that love it. It also, that process creates gases.
So you're bloated now. You're gassy.
You get heartburn,
yep,
right? And your doctor a lot of times will tell you, oh, you have too much stomach acid. We need to give you an acid blocker so that doesn't happen. And what's interesting is that acid blocker helps. It reduces the pain because it's neutralizing the acidic gases that your body's producing. Okay. What it's not doing is helping your body do a better job of breaking down your food so that those gases aren't produced in the first place. Yep. So once again, hydrochloric acid is the key there to prevent that rotting process from taking place, getting that food into your small intestine when it's in the right form. So it's not bacteria superfood anymore. It's now nutrient-rich chyme that your intestines can suck all of the goodness out of.
Right, and hopefully. So let's talk about what also happens, because no one ever talks about this. Your doctor puts you on a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor. So now what's happening? So you now have no hydrochloric acid. You don't have any breaking down of food or efficient breaking down of food, right? So let's say you are absorbing 50% capacity. That means you're healing at 50% capacity.
At best.
At best, you guys. So what happens years down the line? You stop healing and repairing, you stop regenerating, you start aging like crazy. You start getting autoimmune issues, rheumatoid arthritis, connective tissue disorders like IBS, IBD. What else?
Cardiovascular disease.
Yes, cardiovascular disease, because your veins, your capillaries, they're not healing and repairing properly because you are not absorbing the nutrients needed to heal these tissues. These tissues need to regenerate a lot, you guys, especially when you're aging. So the older you get, the more important it is that you are digesting properly. The more important it is that you are absorbing properly. Go back and watch my story on you aren't what you eat, you are what you absorb, all right? You have to absorb. It doesn't, so there's so many healthy people out there that are like, I eat really well and I'm still really sick. And I'm like, well, you're bloated. Are you gassy? Are you all these things? Yes, they are. Okay, you're not digesting properly. And so now you just have very expensive poop. All right.
So we need to break down the food properly, and that's really important. To answer a question that's come up, what do you do if you don't have a gallbladder? you're basically going to have to support your bile with an exogenous bile. Basically, you need to take either ox bile or bile salts of some kind in order to do that fat emulsification. And you'll be told over and over again, no, that's not necessary, that's silly, your gallbladder wasn't that important. This is important because if your body cannot absorb essential fatty acids, it can't do a lot of really important things.
Like heal.
Like heal.
So you're not going to experience breakdown 1 year post-op or 2 years post-op, but 10 years, yeah, you're going to have brain issues. You're going to have like all kinds of neurological problems. You're going to have joint issues. You're going to have, again, connective tissue disorders. And your doctor isn't trained to be like, oh, shoot, maybe it was that, what is a colectomy?
Cholecystectomy.
Maybe it was that cholecystectomy that we did 15 years ago.
Yeah.
They are not trained to do that. They don't have the mental capacity to do that.
Well, they don't have the time.
They don't have the time. They don't care, right? Like, well, they care, but not in that way.
It's just not on their radar because
it's not their job to do the super sleeping for you. Sorry,
Right.
I won't talk over you.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Sorry,
Go on.
So I'm just really passionate about this. I love digestion. It's so fun.
So basically, if you don't have a gallbladder, you need to take a dose of bile with every meal that includes fat. Don't take it if you're not eating fat. It doesn't do any good for things that are not fat.
Yeah.
So if you're eating some fruit, leave it out. If you're eating fruit with cream, maybe you need it in there. Typically, it depends on which product you get. We really like Cholacol from Standard Process.
Yeah.
And what we like about it is that the dosing is really simple. You take one with each normal meal that has fat. If you're eating a super fatty meal, you might do 2 in that case. If you're not eating fat, once again, you don't do any. So pretty straightforward that way. But you will never not need it. You may not notice an immediate effect of not getting that in there, but it's affecting you. So just plan on getting some bile support for the rest of your life if you don't have the gallbladder. Don't touch that.
It's covering the thing there. See? There you go. Okay, keep going. Let's look at your face, though. Your face is so great.
All right, you control.
Oh, okay.
You drive.
I'll drive.
So, so that covers the breakdown, which is the upper digestion portion of this. Sorry for the motion sickness.
I'm trying to drive.
There's another really important piece that goes into proper digestion, and we've talked about a lot already, but that's the absorption piece. So you can have your upper digestion on point and still suffer from major digestive issues if you are not absorbing properly. And there are a few different things that can go into preventing you from absorbing properly. The first one being that you might have so much inflammation in there that it's like the lining of your intestines is just incapable of absorption.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you're going to develop chronic nutrient deficiency, basically. And what's tricky about it is that it'll take so many different forms in terms of the symptoms that you experience that you won't necessarily have an obvious, oh, that's because my absorption isn't there.
Right.
You'll have fatigue, you'll have brain fog, memory loss.
Kids are really quiet. I'm going to go check on them. Hold this.
You'll have anxiety, like you can't leave your children in the next room for more than 4 minutes without panicking. Clearly it is. And it could look like lower digestive symptoms, which would be the constipation, the diarrhea. But it all depends on what's going on there. So there's inflammation that can get into it. One of the really common causes of absorption issues is actually dysbiosis in the intestines, which is where, sassy sow, SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where you have too many of the wrong kinds of bacteria in your small intestine that they've overrun the whole system. It's anarchy down there.
Okay, so someone's saying histamine reactions to everything. That's because you've had inflammation in your gut for potentially decades. Did you guys already talk about that?
No. So that's another kind of sign of there's something going on down there, right? And SIBO will definitely lead to that.
And it probably started like in your childhood. Like you probably had like gut issues when you were a kid, and now you're an adult and you have like histamine intolerances and stuff. So like histamine intolerances didn't just start overnight. Like that's been years worth.
Not to sidetrack too much, but there's sort of 2 main situations where histamines become a problem. One of them is this SIBO type situation where there's just so much, it's just so messy down there that your body becomes very sensitive to all these histamines being produced. The other issue is mast cell disorder, where there's these cells that actually release histamine that they kind of start running out of control, and they're just popping out histamine left and right. But that's off topic. So absorption, very, very important, and making sure that you've got a healthy gut flora is super, super key.
Ooh, yeah.
In this situation.
We haven't even spoken about antibiotics, guys, because a lot, have we?
No.
Okay, so another reason why people have inflammation, they have food allergies, is because of this, what I like to call antibiotic injury. And hashtag antibiotic injury, I don't know. But people that have utilized antibiotics a lot throughout childhood, how many people went on antibiotics for acne? This guy right here.
Yeah, pretty much my entire adolescence.
Mm-hmm. And you had IBS, didn't you?
I did pretty much my entire adolescence, starting not long after I went on the antibiotics.
Right,
as it turns out.
And then you had a lot of stress, and then 15 years later, you got colon cancer. So that's weird. It's a weird coincidence. So, not saying that if you've been on, well, he also went on antibiotics on his mission because you got tested positive for TB in Ukraine.
Yeah, it was a positive skin test. I didn't have TB, but the
Right.
prophylactic measure when you get a positive skin test is 9 months of antibiotics.
Yeah, so literally
really strong antibiotics. For that
years and years and years worth of antibiotics for this poor guy.
Yeah.
And we're still healing that. Like, we're still trying to fix that right now. I mean,
Right.
part of that was cutting out his rectum, getting a tumor out of there. But,
yeah. So the problem here is that the conventional treatment for SIBO, assuming that the doctors even acknowledge that SIBO is a thing, a lot of them don't. But if they do find that there's stuff going on in your gut, they'll use rifaximin or something similar, an antibiotic, to try to treat that. And a lot of people do get temporary relief from it, like 3 weeks of feeling pretty good or better, right? But then symptoms come back, and a lot of times they come back with full force. It's like a rebound effect, and you feel worse than ever. And then they might try a different antibiotic, and you go through the same treadmill cycle over and over and over again. The reason why that's not working, though, is that the antibiotics are basically a carpet bomb. So it goes in there, it just kills off everything, leaves a barren wasteland in your intestines. And then what takes over is basically the first opportunistic thing to get back there.
Right.
And it's not usually going to be the good stuff, unfortunately,
Right.
unless you're doing this with a lot of really clear intention.
Well, because again, so one thing that I like to use a lot is what you feed breeds. And so oftentimes when people go on antibiotics or they're sick, you crave what? You don't crave vegetables, you crave sugar,
Refined
right?
carbs.
So you crave refined carbs. So now you're taking all these antibiotics, you're killing everything. Once you stop, what you are refeeding first is the bad bacteria, because you go to refined carbs, you go to sugars and stuff. So it is really hard, but it's really important to make sure that you are refeeding the good guys. So you have to eat a lot of like complex carbs, like vegetables, really good fats and proteins, to refeed the good guys again. I want to go back to antibiotic injury, because what happens a lot is you're carpet bombing everything in your gut. Now, all of you hopefully have heard that 80% of your immune system is your gut flora. So now you are destroying a lot of your autoimmune, your immune system, and your gut flora actually releases chemicals. It directly communicates through chemicals on how your white blood cells respond, right? So now we are, for lack of a better word, we're making your gut flora more stupid because we're killing it, right? And so now we're not creating these healthy chemicals that tell the white blood cells to do the smart things. All right. Now the bad bacteria. Now here, I'm gonna put this on me because I need both hands. Will you hold this? Okay. So you have this constant balance. Other camera too. You have this constant balance in your gut of, sorry guys, of good bacteria and bad bacteria, right? And they're always, they're both always going to be there, but we always want the good bacteria to be the king of the castle. And so you feed the good bacteria and it's the king of the castle, and the bad bacteria kind of stays at bay. They have this kind of synonymous relationship, symbiotic relationship, sorry. They have this symbiosis, okay? But the good bacteria you want way up here, all right? When you do antibiotics, they're down here, both of them. And then we eat our standard American diet and the bad bacteria starts to proliferate and it grows and grows. And we start getting symptoms like yeast infections and gas and, UTIs. And now we've got this, right? And now the bad guys are on top and they're the king of the castle. And our immune system isn't getting the good chemicals from the good bacteria because they're down here now, right? So we want to make sure that we're always refeeding the good guys, the good things. That's why everyone asks me what my favorite probiotic is. And I'm like, I don't have one other than fruits and vegetables specifically, right? So that's the issues with antibiotics is I'm almost falling here. We're constantly carpet bombing the immune system. And then we're growing back the bad bacteria. Then we're carpet bombing again. And then we're growing back the bad bacteria. Now we have this, it's no longer this, it's this. And then we're getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And now we have SIBO and leaky gut. And now we have autoimmune issues. And now we have thyroid issues. And now we have like digestive issues and you name it. We've got every issue under the sun. All right. And now what really sucks is antibiotic injury wasn't a known thing 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Doctors now are just learning about it, just now, which means that we're going to be hearing more about it from our mainstream medicine in the next 10 years, which is why it's so important for us to understand this so that we can advocate for ourselves. So, for instance, when you take your child into your doctor because they have an ear infection, 80% of ear infections, you guys, are viral. So let's say you take your child, they look at the ears, they're like, oh, the eardrum is inflamed, here's an antibiotic. Well, then you can ask your doctor, I'm sorry, I didn't see you test for a bacterial infection. And then they can be like, well, the protocol is antibiotics. And you're like, if it's a bacterial infection, you see? So it's really important that we understand these things because you might be giving your 2-year-old or your 1-year-old or your 6-month-old antibiotics and it's not even necessary. And now we're doing that. Let's say this is their good flora, right? And you're carpet bombing it for no reason. And then the bad guys are going to grow because let's say we're feeding them sugar and carpet bombing it again because now they're going to get more and more ear infections because they're taking more and more antibiotics and their immune system is becoming less and less healthy. Is this making sense so far, you guys? Let me know.
So it gets worse because it's not just the bacteria that are involved in your gut. There's also a whole other group or several groups of things that some are okay, some are not so okay. It's going to be the yeast and the fungus and parasites and viruses and archaea. There's all sorts of stuff in there. And we're paused. Hang on. Okay, we're back. And all of these things in a healthy environment, they exist to some degree or other, but once again, they are well controlled. As soon as antibiotics get involved, one of the first things to rear its ugly head is candida. Yay. Right? And you've probably heard of candida infections. They're very common. Women tend to get them down there quite a bit. We can get thrush on our tongues. And those of you that have had newborns with thrush know how that loves to cycle back and forth between mom and baby. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. So candida in particular is very tenacious, very opportunistic, and will almost always show up when antibiotics get involved. Yeah. So sometimes when we're trying to address lower digestive issues, things in the intestines, we need to take care of the pathogens. And a lot of these pathogens are very, very sneaky. They have a lot of methods of avoiding your immune defenses, avoiding detection, so you don't even know you need to deal with them. And we did an episode on that too on the podcast, our stealth pathogens episode.
Mm-hmm. Stealth pathogen protocol. I think it was released December 31st.
So the very end of December.
Mm-hmm. So if you have like SIBO, if you have Lyme, if you have mono, any of that kind of stuff, you might want to listen to that episode. It's called Stealth Pathogen Protocol.
Mm-hmm. But if you've done everything else, you've figured out your upper digestion, so your hydrochloric acid is on point, you're getting enough bile support, you've got the pancreatic enzymes figured out, you have done all the work to balance your gut flora so you don't have, the SIBO situation going on, and you're still having issues, this might be where you need to look. You might have some sort of opportunistic, stealthy pathogen that's messing with your system.
Mm-hmm. Or SIBO. Did you say SIBO?
Well, SIBO Yes, that would be kind of a related but different thing. So you could do a whole SIBO protocol, but still suffer because of a stealth pathogen.
Right.
Because the SIBO protocol itself does not necessarily address the stealth pathogen.
Right.
We have a whole other thing that we do with that, and it's very complex because these pathogens are very complex.
Right.
So, but we don't really need to go into all the ugly details of that
No,
because that's getting into the weeds.
Let's talk about just because the majority of us just need upper digestive support, right? It's the hydrochloric acid. It's maybe the pancreatic enzymes to help break down food. So let's talk about some things that you can do there. What I like to do for people is wake up the enteric nervous system. So when your enteric nervous system, remember that's the nervous system that controls the gut. When that's been paralyzed from like fear or being in fight or flight response all the time, what you want to do is kind of wake it up. And so there's a product I like called Digest Forte, also known as bitters. Now it's bitter. When I put my clients on this, they hate me.
That's the whole point though. Yeah. The bitterness is that's the reason for taking it.
So what it does, you want to suck on it for as long as possible. I say if you can suck on it for 10 minutes, most people can only do like 2 minutes, and that's okay. So you suck on it before your meals. And what that does, it's really bitter. You'll start salivating. It triggers this nervous system response. And it's basically saying, wake up. Like, wake up, we're doing this. Like, we're working right now, right? So it hits all the neurosensors in your mouth, in your gut. But it also helps to heal leaky gut as well. There's some really potent herbs in there that help with that inflammatory response. So we're waking up the enteric nervous system. We're saying, get to work. You can't be sleeping right now, right? So suck on the Digest Forte. Then you're going to eat your meal. And then you're going to support that hydrochloric acid. Let's say you do that baking soda test and you fail it. Then you're going to take Zypan, all right? Zypan it's not fake hydrochloric acid, it's real hydrochloric acid that you are just supplementing now because your body isn't producing it, all right? Zypan, you have to be very careful with Zypan because dosage is everything. Dosage is going to make or break you, all right? So be very, very careful with your dosage. What I tell people is what you're gonna do, okay, Digest Forte, eat, then take your Zypan. Day one, bite half a Zypan and do half a Zypan with all your meals. Or cut it in half. Don't bite it because it's really bitter.
Most people can start with one.
A lot of people can't, though. Some people can't. If you can't start with one, start with one.
Start with one. If it causes discomfort,
then go down to a half. Yes. And then you're going to do like one per meal for about 2 days or a half per meal for 2 days, depending on where you're at. And then let's say you're like, oh, I feel really good. Okay. Then you go up to 2 Zypan for 2 days. And let's say you're like, wait, I don't have that heavy feeling in my stomach anymore. I'm not bloated and gassy anymore. Like my stools are now sinking versus floating. Like this is really great. That's a good sign that 2 Zypan is pretty good for you. But we're going to push it even further. Why are you laughing? Oh, you didn't mean to laugh?
Red Brick Schoolhouse is laughing.
Yeah, you did, Casey. You totally meant to laugh.
I would be laughing at us disagreeing with each other.
So then, you're, like, let's say 2 is like great, right? Like there's magical things happening with 2. Go for 3 anyways. And let's say you do 3 and you have heartburn now and you're gassy and bloated. Too much hydrochloric acid and too little hydrochloric acid are going to have very similar effects. So now you want to go, now you're like, okay, 3 is too much, 1 isn't enough, 2 is perfect. Here's the thing with Zypan though, it's always going to change. It's always going to change. So like 2 is never going, it's never going to stay at 2. Let's say you have a more stressful week at work. You might need 3. All right. Or let's say you start healing. My people that take Digest Forte and Zypan, like they need Zypan for a less amount of time because that Digest Forte helps the gut to kind of kick in and do its job properly. So you might only need 1 Zypan when you go out to eat at someone's house or at a restaurant or something. So Zypan needs to always be fluid. All right. You can't just be militant about it. Like I take my 2 and only my 2. All right.
Zypan in particular is more beneficial for digesting protein and fat than carbohydrates. And you can also gauge how much Zypan you take based on how much fat and protein you're getting in a meal. So if you're planning to eat a big fat steak, take more Zypan.
Yeah.
If you're, once again, you're just going to be snacking on some fruit,
Don't take it.
you may not need it. The Digest Forte could still be beneficial there, but you wouldn't necessarily need to do the Zypan at the same time. So be flexible with it. Don't feel like you need to find your dose and then that is a rock solid rule for you every time you eat.
And then last but not least is supporting those digestive enzymes. So we supported the mastication, we supported the hydrochloric acid, right? Now we're going into the small intestine and we have the enzymes being released from the pancreas. That's when you take Enzycore. And Enzycore is going to help. So, okay, so here's what we're doing, right? Big chunky food. It's going from this size. We're sorry. We're going from this size food, then we masticate it, and that is chewing. It's not a dirty word that you're thinking of right now. And so you masticate that food, and why are you? Bad joke. And then it goes into the stomach, and that hydrochloric acid makes it smaller. And then it goes into the small intestine, and the digestive enzymes make it really small. And now it's so small it can enter into your microvilli in your intestine, right? Let's say we skip some of those steps, and now you have food that you're masticating, and it goes into into your stomach, and you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, so it's this big chunky food going into the small intestine, and those enzymes can only take it from here to here. So now we have big chunky food in the small intestine. It's not going to fit into that microvilli. And so that's why we're taking all of these steps, right? We're making sure the hydrochloric acid is doing its job. So you're taking the Zypan. We're making sure that Enzycore is packing in more digestive enzymes in case your pancreas is not working, right? So we're getting that food really, really, really small. So it's not big and chunky and fermenting and causing bloat and gassiness and inflammation, all right? Because it is going to provoke an immune response.
Now, here's the thing. If your pancreas is working just great, no issues there, and if you've got your stomach acid on point, because that's going to get the pH levels to where they need to be to activate these different enzymes, you may not need the Enzycore. It's not something it's not something that everybody has to be on. A lot of times what we find is that if you do the Digest Forte and you've got good stomach acid, whether that's with the Zypan hydrochloric acid or not, then you might be good to go.
Yes.
So you don't need to rush right into that and feel like, oh my goodness, the only way I'm ever going to digest food properly is if I'm taking 3 products just in my upper digestion.
Right.
I don't want you to have that impression. I don't think you want them to have that impression.
No.
But for a lot of people, digestion has been so messed up for so long
that they have to have all of this.
That it does take that. And here's kind of the cool thing about the Enzycore. If you take it and your body doesn't need it to break down food,
it's really gentle.
It'll still utilize those enzymes. In fact, there is a whole field of cancer treatments, alternative cancer treatments, based on enzyme therapy, where if you get enough of these concentrated in the different parts of your body, they may help to digest bad cells. Now, I'm not saying that Enzycore is a cure for cancer. Please don't get that impression from me one bit. What I'm saying though is that there are a lot of beneficial actions of these enzymes, even if they aren't directly contributing to your digestive health in that moment.
Right. Last but not least, one thing that I like, so let's say you have tons of inflammation, and like going back to that analogy of the broken leg, right? You cast that broken leg, you don't walk on it for like months at a time. But when it comes to your digestive tract, we can't put your digestive tract in a cast for a few months and let it heal, right? You still have to eat food. So we make sure we're eating really gentle foods. We're cooking 90% of our vegetables, okay? Eating raw vegetables is just gonna tear you up, you guys. So make sure you're cooking the majority of it, if not all of it in the beginning. So you're eating this food, you're putting a little bit of stress in your GI tract, even with all of those enzymes, because you're still using it. What I like to do at the end, and you can only do this twice a day, you can't do it for all your meals, is I recommend to some of my extreme cases licorice root, so high-grade licorice root. You might have a different opinion, because let's go back to that leg. Let's say you're limping on that leg, right? That's the equivalent of eating a low inflammatory food with digestive enzymes. It's gonna hurt with you limping on it. So what do? You put like a cooling balm on it. That's what the licorice is, all right? So you eat your food, you take your digestive enzymes, you wait 20 to 30 minutes, and then you take your high grade or high licorice, whatever. High grade licorice, and you take that, and it's like a soothing balm through the GI tract. And it's very anti-inflammatory. It's also an adrenal tonic. So it's wonderful. And it goes in and it just soothes everything. It's so great. I love it. Now, a lot of people hate the taste of it. I don't know why. I love it. I love it so much.
It's a bitter.
It's kind of bitter.
No,
all these things are bitters.
It's a bitter herb.
Yeah.
So it's doing a lot of the same things that the Digest Forte is doing, but you're getting a more concentrated form of this particular one.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if you're Danish, you probably love it, right? Some of the Scandinavian countries love. I'm
Scandinavian.
Yeah, you're Norwegian. The Scandinavian countries love the taste of bitter licorice. Americans like red licorice, which isn't even really licorice. But so anyway, licorice is it's not. Just drink it. It's fine. You'll be fine. But there are cases where it's not a good idea, potentially, because it can cause blood pressure to go up.
So you can't, guys, don't just like go out and buy it. All right.
If you already have hypertension,
don't do this.
You want to be super careful with it. Now,
if you're on medication for hypertension, you don't want to take this. All right. Like you want to be really, really, really careful.
Yeah, like if you're on an ACE inhibitor,
we have
for instance.
2 minutes left.
Okay. All right.
We got to wrap this up.
We didn't even get to answer questions. Oh no. So it's
we have to end this.
Licorice root is the one that we like. It does come in a tea form. You can, I think, get it in a tablet. You can definitely get it in a tablet form.
We'll make a link, you guys, and I'll post it on my stories on all the supplements that we spoke about. And if you have any questions, like reach out to us. Like, obviously we can't really tell you which ones to get unless you're a client of ours. But according to what you learned today, I'm hoping that you can like kind of guess and see, okay, maybe I should just start with the Enzycore. Maybe 2 ones to really start out with that are nice and gentle: Digest Forte and Enzycore. If you have low blood pressure and you have a lot of gut inflammation, maybe try the Licorice. If you fail the baking soda test, then you want to get Zypan, all right? And you want to retrain your body to have high hydrochloric acidity. We have like 30 seconds left. Will this be on replay? It will only be up for 24 hours, assuming Instagram doesn't delete it right now.
Sometimes
everybody
they've been doing
pray.
That lately.
Everyone pray that it doesn't delete it. Okay, and that's it. So we have so much more we could talk about. We should do another one of these. Should we do another one of these?
When?
I don't know. Well, I don't know.
Not right now.
Not right now, no.
Okay.
Our children have been on technology for far too long.
Now, if you've got a really complex digestive issue and you want to chat about it, then you can schedule a consult with us and we can go into a little bit more detail.
Gutsy.ch/consult. We got to hang up like right now.
But if you just want, what's the next step for me? Do the baking soda test.
Yes.
Right? 4th teaspoon of baking soda, 4 ounces of water, first thing in the morning, drink it down, time yourself until you burp. If you burp quickly, then that's a good thing. If you don't, then you might need the Zypan.
We gotta go. Love you guys. Bye. Sorry.
Bye.
Bye.